So as Block and Order shifts its focus, I don't know if shift is the right word, from crypto and blockchain to including AI and including the experts in the space, and we certainly have one of them on the show today, I want to highlight a quote of yours that I personally find really interesting. I feel seen a little bit. It says, learning AI is as easy and as hard as flossing teeth every day. Now, as somebody who does floss every day, and it's something that my parents basically just beat into me because they didn't want me to have the problems that they have. And I know a lot of people who just, they go to the dentist, they spend their life savings on dental work, and they still don't floss. How did you arrive at that as being the nexus point for learning AI? This is fascinating.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I have to confess first, I don't floss every day.
You use AI every day?
Oh, I absolutely use AI every
Excellent.
day. And that's how I'm thinking about this, because there was a time, right? So I started using AI daily, at least like try to use AI daily about 3 years ago when OpenAI ChatGPT first came out. And I have to say, for the first 6 months or so, I fall off the wagon often. And I tried a number of things. I put a yellow sticker on my laptop and it says use AI. And I ask my husband to remind me use AI and what kind. But eventually I'm just like, you know what? If I didn't use it today, I'm going to use it the next day. And even if I just use it once a week, it's fine. And then I suddenly realized, actually, that's my behavior of flossing teeth.
It's really the same thing. I've tried the thing, which I don't know if I could really show it, but you put something on the ceiling. So when I go like this, it says work harder up on the ceiling. I've tried that. It doesn't really work. Well, that's a great segue into introducing our guest today, Wei Chen, the Chief Legal Officer and Executive Vice President of Regulatory Strategy for Infoblox, as well as the founder of the Atticus Project. Please, everybody out there, give a warm B&O welcome to Ms. Wei Chen.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
Calling in from Brussels. I respect the hustle. A lot of people, if they say, I'm traveling, I can't make it, let's postpone to next week, but not you. You're an inspiration to all future B&O guests.
Yeah. All of those forensic last minute not having time to cancel or didn't realize this is actually a video. Let's all put that all behind us. Yeah. We don't need to talk about
that. That's great. Well, why don't you kick us off by talking a little bit about your journey, your career arc that led you to Infoblox, what brought you there, how long have you been there? I do see on your CV, just kind of a non sequitur, that you were with Sun Microsystems, which, fun fact about me, I've represented a lot of solar energy companies and renewable energy companies, and I used to use their Edgar filings to get risk factors. So that's a life is full circle moment for me. So thank you for that. But enough about me. How did you arrive at Infoblox? And just tell us how you got there and what sparked your interest in AI.
Yeah, thanks so much. For those of you who have never heard of Sun Microsystem, that's okay. A lot. Well, you just aged, you dated yourself, Kyle.
I do that to myself a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of gray in here. I don't know how it comes across in the video.
I would say, growing up, I grew up in China, first generation immigrant, didn't come to this country until I was 23. And I would say for the first 40 years of my life, it's all about following the herd, hey, going to the best school, following, if other people wants to go to the US, why can't I do it? If other people go to the highest paying law firm, maybe I should try too, right? Until at one point, and it has to do with AI, I realized actually maybe there's something that I'm passionate about. And I'm maybe good at it. And it's all out of a self-interest, right? Everything that everybody does with dedication, there's a little bit of self-interest in them. My self-interest in going into AI was really, I was an M&A attorney by training. I'm an attorney that, oh, hey, Kyle, we have a lot
I knew we were friends. I knew it.
Thousands of documents, right? hundreds of thousands of pages that I have reviewed in my whole life as a M&A associate. Even today, I'm a very hands-on person. I don't want to lose my trade, So uh, uh, I when I was a junior associate or like senior associate, I didn't want to do it. I think it was a waste of time. And then when I become a client, I didn't want to pay for it, right? And back then, this was like 7 years ago, people were pitching me that, there's all these AI tools that potentially with a click of a button, and then now you can summarize all of these things very accurately. And it turned out that was not the case. And then 7 years after, we're still on this journey. And one of the realization is actually AI is an evolving thing, and it learns just like human learns. And lo and behold, I got down to this path of creating these very large scale expert annotated data sets. When you think about data sets, think about these like gigantic spreadsheets, right? The row is like termination for convenience, date of the agreement, change of control. And then the column is like hundreds of documents. So we created all of those, had an amazing group of volunteers, including law students. And I had the opportunity to work with like leading AI researchers, right? Because that's the way that they can get their papers published. And as a result, I have the honor of like being listed as a co-author of these academic papers that get accepted at the best of the best machine learning conferences like NeurIPS, like ACL. And that's how I learned. And then, of course, living with an AI researcher at home also helps, just like talk about this like every single day, 24 hours a day. So leading to all of that 7 years after, not only we have gone down from just doing a training data set, but we went through the ChatGPT transformation, and now I would say sometime in January and February we're now at another transformation, which is the agentic transformation.
That's great stuff, and what a fascinating journey, and thank you for sharing. Always nice to have somebody in the house with you who specializes in it to kind of help grease that process along. In your role as chief legal officer for Infoblox, what is your day-to-day like? What does Infoblox do? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thanks so much. So I'm the chief legal officer of a company headquartered in Santa Clara, California, and it's called Infoblox. So Infoblox is the leader in networking management and security. We focus on this particular thing called DNS, domain name system. And people probably don't know about what DNS is, but you use it every single day, right? Infoblox.com get translated into machine learning, into IP address, which is just a series of numbers. And that's how your computer get connected to the internet. And everybody is using DNS every single day without knowing it. My journey at Infoblox is one of the amazing transformation for myself as well. When I first came in, that was my first GC job. I was an M&A attorney by training, and I started doing all of the other stuff: employment, legal, employment, litigation, IP, and all of those things. At that point, I was like, oh my God, I really stretched myself, right? And then lo and behold, the CEO who hired me retired. And so 9 months in, I got a new boss, which almost amount to a new job, right? So I have to reapprove myself and, do all of those things. And I was like, hey, Scott, what do you think, where could I add more value? And then he looked at me, he was like, oh yeah, we were doing this like Australia thing. And I thought that they were able to change some of the standards and regulations. If we could do that, that would be like really cool, right? And I was like, standards? That's hard. And then he looked at me, he was like, that's not hard. And just that one response put me on this journey of becoming a fake it until I make it government affairs / public policy person.
Nice.
Yeah, so for the past, I would say 2 years, it's one of the amazing opportunities that I have never thought I would be able to do. So we were able to collaborate with leading, you know, researchers and then regulators, both in the US and in the EU. We help co-author the Secure DNS Deployment Guide with NIST, and we also help draft the Secure DNS Guide for NIST 2, which is the Networking Infrastructure Security Act in the EU. So one of the major regulations, and we have become a trusted advisor to ENISA, which is the regulators in EU. And I'm now in Brussels, actually doing my public policy trip to talk about this new initiative I feel very excited about, and it's called DNS Aid. And it's one of the ways to keep the agentic web open, right? So back in the 1990s when internet was first formed, there was a time, Kyle, you're going to date yourself again.
I know, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Back in the 1990s, when you have a computer and you wanted to get connected to the web, you have to call someone at Stanford and say, can you put my computer on the list? And that's how you get connected. Over time, people are like, this won't scale. Let's create a directory. And then there's these smart people suddenly realize, actually, why don't we do a decentralized distributed system called DNS? So you have these top level domains of .com, .edu, .gov, and then the DNS would just first do the reverse lookup of like .com, and then get to a whole bunch of servers, and then do infoblox.com, and you get to the Infoblox servers, and then you say support.com, and then you get to the support servers. So what we're trying to do now is trying to add an agent, right? So agent.infoblox.com, and then you will know the DNS, which is in everybody's infrastructure, will know they're talking. This is agentic transaction, right? Agent traffic instead of human traffic. And it's just super important because nobody owns DNS, right? Somebody owns the directory, but nobody owns the DNS. And if you don't like one of the directories, you don't like the way that they're treating you, you don't like the fees that they're charging you, you take your name and you go to another place, right? Unlike in the social media or in these app store situation, you can't, because you build a whole bunch of presence there, and it's very difficult, right? So that's why I'm here, and I think that the world is very interested in making sure that this new agentic web is open and interoperable.
That's so fascinating that you have this DNS approach here. My background's in intellectual property, so I got interested in internet domains kind of from that angle. And that's right, exactly. But also that's my intellectual property interest is what got me eventually into crypto. But then I learned about domain names and these decentralized systems and the history of how the DNS system came about, and the way ICANN came about as this kind of global governance organization, for better or worse, which I think there's kind of a through line there. And I think you just completed the sentence from, the early internet to blockchain and other decentralized systems, and now to this agentic framework where you have this, how is it going to be governed? How are they going to communicate with each other? What's the standard setting for that? How is it going to work across different jurisdictions? So I think it's just not really a question there, but I think it's a really interesting through line of how these systems work, and now kind of looking forward into an agentic future, the kind of uncertainty of the legal framework and regulatory structure, like what's going to happen next. I think those are a lot of the answers I'm thinking about kind of philosophically. I'm just curious from your point of view, the types of issues you're seeing, either at the, you mentioned NIST and the EU, how are they approaching these novel agentic DNS type issues, if at all, and what sort of governing standards are being set forth?
I think the principles are very commonly accepted. But first of all, I want to acknowledge what an exciting time we're in now. Can you imagine? This is the time. It's almost like the internet time, the pre-internet time, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Like the other day, I saw someone and he was like, "Oh yeah, DNS." I was like, "How did you know about DNS?" He was like, "When I was in law school, we had this debate about internet governance, right?" And we are
Nice.
at that time now. I think like the law students probably are having lively debate about like AI and how should AI be governed and everything, but the overall principle should apply, right? Interoperability. You don't want vendor lock-in, and then there's only 2 app stores in the world. Whoops, that we are in that world. Can you imagine if we only have the 2 app stores and no internet? What kind of world would that
Oh,
be?
God.
Right?
Right.
And if we don't do this right from a foundational perspective, then that's where we're gonna end up. It's not like, so I've been talking with people from these big AI players. They want interoperability. They want to keep the internet open, right? They want all the right things, but it's just the market gravity of driving, you know, economic benefits.
No,
So I'm
everyone wants to be a platform with platform lock-in, and they're an aggregator and et cetera, right? That's the business strategy. So having this open
uh-oh.
source, Claude can export a
We don't
markdown
represent
file.
any of those people.
No, none of
No,
them. Yeah, yeah,
no.
yeah.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it, because we often talk on the show about what it was like in the long ago, in the nascent internet days and the early blockchain days, and you see everybody wants to get their pound of flesh or get a piece of it somehow, but they're not sure how. From a regulatory standpoint, I think that presents a lot of very interesting possibilities, but there's also a natural, I don't know what the right word is, roadblock or obstacle that you have to overcome, that I think is that it hits AI unique in ways that it doesn't necessarily hit the internet and other industries the same way. And that's the speed with which it develops.
Oh my God.
Now you're at the regulatory forefront. You're in Brussels. You're meeting people all over the world. What are you seeing people get right and wrong as they start to try to regulate these things, specifically keeping in mind the fact that once, like, okay, great, we passed the law today. By the time we get there, AI is blown through whatever the thing is that they're concerned about regulating in the first place, and it's now a whole different thing that they now have to look at. So what do people get right and wrong on this front?
I would say that what people get right is everybody agree that AI needs to be regulated somehow or controlled. There needs to be some kind of AI governance. I think
Yeah.
even the big AI labs now, like this Anthropic what is it called? Mythios. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
Mythios.
Yeah.
Mythos came
Ethos.
out. Yeah, it is very powerful. I don't know whether it's as dangerous as what they claim it to be, but I have seen how bad these
Yeah.
how naughty these really powerful models could become. However, I think what people are getting right is they understand that there's the need to provide governance, provide trust, right? However, I think they don't understand AI behavior, like especially this truly agentic behavior, enough to identify the right things, to put new guardrails. There's old guardrails around that could apply to agentic world already, like interoperability, like auditability, or like transparency, like you cannot commit a crime or fraud or harassment regardless what kind of weapon, what kind of tool that you use to do those things. But I think the enforcement um, is less, right? It's almost like you know um, physically, let's think about, uh, if people just throw litters everywhere on the street, unless it's in San Francisco, like, it's probably going to be fined, that those people probably are going to be fined or potentially have a misdemeanor. But when people spam, spam you or like spam call you, I mean, the enforcement activity is a little bit less. And then when people are just like, have launch these malicious attacks, I don't see, legal enforcement against those criminals, or at least like publicly, execute, enforce those actions. So the deterrence, I kind of feel like the deterrence from a cybersecurity perspective probably could be enhanced. Because now with this AI model so powerful, getting breach everybody is just going to be so easy. But a really easy example would be, it's very easy to open our garage doors, right? Our garage doors is not that high tech. It's like if people could just like feel free to go open everybody's garage doors and then like just steal stuff from your garage. I mean, like, there will never be an end to police activities, and then people like, suffering. And then there will be like this whole industry that is going to be created to protect how you harden your garage doors. So I think that, having a little bit of a proactive legal enforcement is probably something that, the regulators should start thinking about.
Yeah.
The other thing, like for example, when I was talking with regulators about agent discovery, right? And it's kind of foreign to them. They don't understand that why agent needs to discover another agent. And I have to say, like, I have to, because I'm seeing a lot of blank faces, and it was like, why do you need to do that, right? Like, how does it work and that kind of thing. So I have to do a lot of soul searching as to, hey, what are we talking about? Are we talking about like something that's so far down the future I can't even draw a line from today to that place? So I think that I have just recently came up with this like three-phase of agentic transformation, and we're going to have to go through. And I was inspired by one of the blogs and then the protocols that Google and Anthropic came out. And it's the first stage is, there is a protocol called A2UI, right? We all have heard about like MCP and A2A, but there's this new thing called A2UI, and it's essentially creating a protocol for agent to talk with human-centric user interface. Like, come into your website, log in with your human credentials, click here, drop down there, all of that. Painful things, right? It's almost like, you want an elephant to swim. So it's very painful to watch when you see agents struggle, on your website, trying to like look around and find the right place to enter. If it's just like truly agentic to agentic, like, they're just going to speak a whole bunch of like gibberish, and we will not even be able to understand any of that. And it's going to happen in milliseconds, right? Instead of this like minutes and hours that you have to sit in there and watch. So that's the agent UI that's currently taking place. And then the second place is going to be AI agent to MCP, right? MCP is essentially a protocol that allows agent to access tools and data sets a lot easier than maneuvering a human-centric user interface, right? And so everybody is still in this agent to UI place, and that's why they feel like, okay, I don't need to find other agents. Of course you don't, right? You're still trying to manage the human website. But you cannot be thinking about things that way, because whatever that you're building today in this like first phase of A2UI, it will have significant impact on the future of A2A when it comes along. And it's going to come along very quickly once people start having this identity, a trust layer figured out, right? So one of the analogy I would use is like, when you're just creating a whole bunch of documents and then you just like name them randomly, that's what's happening with agent today. Agent would be called like, IA678x8 dot, Amazon AWS dot, com/, JSON, right? And you're like, what is this? Why
Just
is
rolls
this
off the
here?
tongue, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and then for us, right, we're like, hey, can we just like make that into a readable, like understandable thing that's tied to your domain? So it would say support.agent.infoblox.com. Why do I have to do that today? You're going to be like, Kyle, Wei, I don't need to do that today because I only have like 50 agents. I remember every single one of them, right? But think about when you get to the A2A world, where it's not you who needs to remember them. It's the outside agents who needs to go find them. So you better figure that out before the A2A phase comes along. And at that point, you're gonna be dealing with trying to go back and clean up, I don't know, tens of thousands of names. So that's in a nutshell what this DNS ADA is all about. And it's all about like making analogies that's approachable, right, understandable by people.
Kyle, it's like the associate that goes into the M&A folder and starts naming things with not the naming convention that you're expecting.
Drives me crazy.
I know. Well, it's so interesting because as you mentioned, the MCP kind of services and the government kind of regulatory was kind of where we started that. But then it's my way of thinking about the AI governance portion of this is the regulatory part, but there's also, I think, the self-regulatory part, the internal governance within organizations and among organizations. And the way I've been communicating about this with other, clients and friends and the people that are working in the spaces, even for our own purposes, is we need to have really good AI governance within the organization so that we have the strong standpoint and feel confident in the way things are structured and data privacy and security. And then but if you don't have that kind of core internal governance and kind of privacy policies and build the structure around that, when you want to go really fast and have all these tools that are then communicating at light speed, it's like, well, you're kind of out in front of your skis. So I'm wondering how you're seeing, as you communicate with other attorneys, regulators, in-house counsel, what's your sense of, like, we're trying to do all these things really quickly. It's moving really fast. No one really understands everything that's going on. But are people taking the time to step back and examine the way that their AI governance is set up and the way their policies are set up and the way that they're training both lawyers and non-lawyers to evaluate and deal and manage with these different risks?
Yeah. I have to say people really want to do the right thing. But without understanding where the future is, or understand how do you use technology to make things much easier, all that effort that you put in place is probably just going to be a whole bunch of paperwork, right? So I think when lawyers today, when governance professionals, when you think about AI governance and privacy rules and all of those things, you have to think about code. You have to think about SDK. You have to think about MCP. You have to think about toolkit. You have to think about how do you policy enforcement that travels with your agent card, and gets enforced at the DNS layer. That's how you apply all of these policies, in reality. Otherwise, it's just a piece of paper that's sitting somewhere, and only the lawyers, who drafted it have probably read it once, and nobody else even know it existed.
Yeah.
And it was outdated 3 months later because they
100%.
weren't talking about MCPs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm an example of this could happen, right? So Kyle, I know that drives you nuts. People don't conform to the naming convention. Of course, if you want them to manually do it, you're just, it's a lost cause.
Sure.
Won't do it. But if you give them a SDK that, every time that, they create a document, they just click a button and then boom, right? The name just automatically get generated. As you know that, lawyers have this desire to redline. So as soon as you generate something, they're going to fix it.
Yeah, that's how we get paid.
Yeah.
That is a fair point. I mean, I've tried different things. Listen, I'm just fastidious in how I want my documents named. I don't think that's a crime, and I won't apologize for it. Certainly not to the associates.
But
Their job is to make me
create
happy.
a little tool, right? You have to create a little tool that makes it so much easier for other
Yeah,
people to adopt it. Yeah.
Yeah, here's the standard, and every time you try and do the thing, it automatically enforces that standard is a lot better than, well, I hope they do the standard this time.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm actively working at the Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation now has a Agentic AI Foundation, AAIF as well, and there's a number of working groups, and I'm like going there, commingling with like AI researchers, standards people, and I learned so much, right? Everybody has different point of view,
yeah,
and I have to say, like lawyers, by our training, has significant advantage because we do two things really well. One is we read these long text documents. We have this like superpower of reading these long text documents, especially M&A attorneys, right?
that's right.
Yeah.
Number one.
Yes. And then the second thing is like we spit out words, right? Very easily, and we synthesize it. So just have a little bit leap of faith that you can become technical. I remember there was a time I was like, oh well, but I'm not technical, and my executive are basically like, what? That's not an excuse anymore, Wei. You go
Yeah.
learn it, right? So by just me now, writing academic papers, published in these AI conferences, and driving standards and literally understand what they're talking about. It's demonstration that this can be done.
That's a great point. And I've seen that various iterations of what you're talking about, the I'm not technical excuse. Like I'm not super technical, but I know which way the wind blows. You see this all the time when firms, for example, just drawing on my own experience, if you have a way as a firm of saving your documents and you have now a new document management system, there's training that's involved and you have to sit down with people, and people invariably they get frustrated and they don't know how to do this. They don't want to do this. This is another version of that. Yeah. So how do you kind of break through that stubbornness? That's not people. Yeah. That's just how people are. People get used to their own routine and stuck in their own ways, and I'm guilty of it. I'm sure we all are in certain ways. How do you break through that? Because let's face it, GCs. I mean, this is like the internet. I can't imagine practicing the law without the internet. You can technically, I guess, but why would you do that? And it's the same thing here.
And I'm certainly not going to say the CEO demands it, but that's like a good incentive. But that is external; it's not intrinsic, right? So there are two things. One is I'm a huge fan. We actually propose this called AI habits, right? It's not about the use cases. It's not about the tools. It's all about AI habits. What are AI habits? I teach these workshops, and there's like 24 of them, right? But I only show the first 5, and then I just quickly flash the 24 and say like, here's what I have assembled, during the past 3 years, and over time that you're going to assemble your own, right? So these are very, very simple things like open an AI tab or open AI app when you get up, the first thing that you open your computer, before email, before Slack, before Teams, right? Really powerful, similar to flossing teeth. If you forget, one day, fine, do it the next day. Don't make it so hard. Don't be so hard on yourself. And then the second thing is like use voice, right? So Kyle, you look at the ceiling and you work hard. I look at the ceiling because when I'm talking with my AI, I can't be looking at the screen. I have to look at the ceiling as if like I'm talking to somebody else, and I just ramble, right? I'm just like blah, right? Have my whole thought just get spit it out to the ceiling. And that's actually a really effective way of conversing with AI. So the second habit is like converse and not prompt. Don't take prompt class and don't ask AI to help you prompt. That was so 2025, right? Don't ask AI to prompt because it's so 2025. And then last week, so I have this weekly uh, Substack. I write a blog called Fairly AI. And last week, I was coaching my daughters, and ironically, one of them is a junior in computer science in college.
Nice.
And it turned out that she doesn't know how to use AI because the schools, they're not doing our students a favor, I have
A
to
lot of
say.
schools say no, just
Yeah.
no AI now, which I think is. And I was in a law school last week, and I'm like, what? I asked a student, "What's your policy on AI?" No AI. Like, okay.
Yeah. I don't want to give the teachers a hard time, but I think that those teachers who don't allow their students to use AI needs to work harder. They need to revamp the way that they test students, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I do, is when we interview candidates for the past 10 years, we give the candidate a technical assessment. And we have never said you can't talk to other people, you can't, do research, you can't you do that because that's what real life is. Real job are open tests. They're open book tests. They're not closed book tests, right?
Right.
And so for the past 2 years, we're like, use AI, please. When you do this technical assessment, please use AI. And they turn out is the one single most effective indicator of a candidate's growth mindset, their technical ability, so much more indicative in terms of the accuracy of the signal compared to a resume or just a 30-minute conversation. And that's where AI can really help. Why? Because the other day, someone came to me and said, hey, should we use AI to screen resume? And I was like, unfortunately, that's a question that doesn't have a yes or no answer, because the answer is going to be resume itself is a very blunt thing, right? When human review resumes, there's so much bias going into reviewing the resume. Are you coming from an Ivy League? Are you from a big law? Have you done this? Have you done that? I have seen people have the perfect resume. I have seen it so many times, have the perfect resume. And then when they take the technical test, it was like, right, I don't know what you're doing, during
Who
those
are
times.
you? Yeah, this isn't the
Yeah.
person on the resume, is
No.
it?
Right? So it's an imperfect thing that human had to do because they didn't have the time to or the bandwidth to say like, everybody take a test and I'm going to review all of them, right? But now we can. So why don't we rethink what are the artifacts that we want the candidate to create, and that is going to result in less bias because now we have the tools available to us, right? So my answer is going to be like, don't have AI screen resume. Have AI screen a variety of different things. Their online profile, their GitHub contribution, their writing assessment. They're like just taking a technical test and have AI assess them all. And hopefully, it's not going to be too much burden on the candidates either, because the candidates can use AI. They can just use AI.
That's great. And I think that overlaps with, I was lucky to be one of the students in your Stanford Law School AI Strategy for Legal Leaders course, which I thought was excellent and would recommend any one of our listeners to go and take. Or I know there's other courses that you've given, but I just happened to have taken that one. And I think, you mentioned, right, the daily AI use, like before you do anything else, open up the tab. That's something I do every day. One of the things you said in the course that really resonated with me, and I've now kind of conveyed to the rest of our law firm, is you may have used AI and gotten really frustrated or seen it like not be able to do something that you thought it should be able to do. And then you kind of gave up or stopped or were less enthusiastic. But it's like, no, you have to keep using the tools, and they change every 3 months, and you have to continue. So I thought that was very useful as well. And then there just were a bunch of other tips and tricks that I thought were really helpful in like thinking through like how to discuss the tools with an organization. Like, yeah, it's good. It's easy enough for like, you or me or Kyle to use a tool, but to get, the entire team or other people you're working with to use the tools in the way you want, I think is a much more difficult task.
It is a difficult task, but you have to show people the benefit on the most painful thing that they do, right? So right now, 2 months ago, there's Cloud Cowork and Cloud Code, now cater to non-coders as well. It's truly agentic behavior. And if you have not been using AI at all, or if you feel like you're falling behind, my recommendation is to skip all of that 3 year of perfecting how to talk to a chat box. Instead, jump to agentic first, right? So trying to get agentic does take a lot more efforts. So at a minimum, if you haven't done anything with AI, it's probably going to take you like 2 weekends just to understand and set everything up. And you probably want someone who has done this before to guide you through that. But my advice is pick that one thing you would be like, oh my God, I would love to pay somebody else to outsource this. It could be scheduling your kids' carpool, right? I have a colleague who has 5 kids, all doing sports. So my job.
I know that I'm starting to know that world now. So yeah, I haven't.
And my job next week, I was like, you know what? I know that you're hesitant about your privacy and everything, but if I can show you that the AI can help you do this, would you be willing to connect your emails and calendars to your cloud instance? And they're like, yes. I was like, okay, let's start there, right? So I'm gonna go there, spend an hour. I'm in Brussels now. Next week I'm in DC, doing very similar education for some agencies at the White House. I take an hour. I set his computer up so that he has a cloud going. I'm gonna set his Cloud MD up. I'm gonna give him a chief of staff agent, and nice. He would have the incentive, right? He would have the incentive to continue persisting because the pain of trying to manually do all of these things is just too much. So pick that one. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering what you would recommend for, someone out there that doesn't have a ton of AI experience and they're a lawyer and they're thinking through either in-house counsel or outside counsel. What are the, either the tools or the workflows for lawyers that you think are maybe the lowest hanging fruit, the easiest things to say, okay, let's start up Claude and apply some basic agentic, framework to help improve this workflow and save you time throughout your day. For lawyers, where do you think they should start?
Yeah, I would say of course, pick that one pain point that you have, right? Most of the people have a personal something that they want. For example, there are people who are super interested in I can't recall. It was some kind of a very obscure math concept. And I was like, I would never spend more than 20 minutes on talking with my chatbot about that question. Oh, what is time? Oh my God. And then he talked with, this was many, many years ago, 2 years ago. And then he talked with ChatGPT back then, right? For an hour about what is time. And he is a convert. You see the power, because as soon as you start digging into these very in-depth question, the answer coming back really is going to astonish you, right? And that's when you're going to be like, oh my God, right? As we all know, I'm sure that you guys use AI a lot. AI really doesn't impress when you ask it to do some mundane things. It doesn't do a good job. Yeah. But if you ask it to do this thing that you never thought that they would be good at, they really surprise you.
At least the ones I'm using. I'm not a numbers guy, so I always ask it to help me with calculating cap tables and things, and it's they're
Yeah.
okay at that. It's
Yeah.
still not as good, but it's better than I could do it. So, I mean, that's a win.
Yeah.
80% is better than 40%. I don't know.
Yeah. So I totally agree. A year ago, when I tried to do the waterfall, like a very simple waterfall, it
Mhm.
was like 40%. But now I would say it's 80%. 80%
Yeah.
is a lot, right? Think about, I have to wait
Yeah.
for the bankers to spend 2 weeks, put together a spreadsheet, and it's often like 80%. And the other 20% is always like really critical, right? Oh, you apply like escrow on option holders. You shouldn't be, right? Like it's kind of like those kind of really, really critical things.
Yeah, it's true. If we can shift gears a tiny bit, there is a topic I would like to cover before you have to go, because I know you're in Europe time. Some landmark cases that came out within recent weeks, because we've talked a lot about general counsels and using AI. The concept of privilege is something that's top of mind for not just lawyers, all our clients. I get constant emails, because we'll tell them about the Hepner case and the Gilbarco case that we'll talk about in a second. I will tell them and say, caution, don't use these things. And they'll be like, well, what if I use this platform? And it'll be one that I've never even heard of. And this is what we do for a living, which is really scary. So how do you encourage people, or how do you educate people in the wake of the Hepner case, where, the implications of using consumer AI tools without the instruction of your lawyer, and Gilbarco, like how do you begin to broach that with people?
I actually, this is how I interpret the case, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Like I hardly even qualify as giving legal advice these days.
No legal advice. We're good. Yeah.
Most of the case is focusing on whether there's an expectation of confidentiality, right? So first of all, there has to be a confidentiality clause in the agreement, for the tool that you're using, and for all of these free tools that you're using, there's no confidentiality clause. And then even in the paid tools, actually there's one LM provider, Gemini, did not have confidentiality clause in there. Just the pro, the individual pro license. You have to negotiate to get it, right? So
that's crazy.
Yeah, because they feel like, hey, we agree not to train, right? They think that's enough.
Right.
And then
But
they're
not
going to give
training
you
is
more
confidentiality, right? So
confidentiality is different. And I don't know what, I'm only speculating, right? So you guys can educate me. How do you reconcile the confidentiality clause in the agreement and all these privacy policies where it allows you to share it with a whole bunch of third parties, right? In your privacy policy, any third party processor are allowed to, and then some of the language in the privacy statement by these AI tools, they're so broad.
Yeah.
Like they don't need to tell you that. So what is the value of the confidentiality clause nowadays with those kind of exceptions? But that said, right, those third party sub-processors or processors, each of them still have a confidentiality clause in place, right? So confidentiality clause always allow a third party to know on a as needed basis. So this privilege concept is very much dependent upon whether you have when you ask the chatbot a question. Are you expecting confidentiality, and is this in in consultation with a lawyer? But as we all know, that everybody has the right to claim privilege even for themselves. Kyle, I'm just making things up. Is that right? I guess people could do their own. Right? Don't cut this out. Okay. I haven't thought about whether they could just pro se represent themselves, and then all the things that they can consult LM. If they have privilege, right? Like on their own, they should be able to have privilege on those.
Well, I think that's actually one of the major
Gilbarco.
readings of if you can compare and contrast Hepner to the Gilbarco case.
Yeah.
Was one, Hepner was criminal, and Gilbarco was civil. So the civil procedure rules
Yeah.
expressly contemplate that there may or may not be like different levels of confidentiality, but the need for discovery is weighed according to the the standard relevancy standard, right? So there's a kind of like versus the Hepner is like it's very explicit in the consumer tool that like if the government requests it, we'll give it to them. Like that's what it says, right? So it's like, well, the government's requesting it, so it's giving it to us. And there wasn't that direct relationship between Hepner and his counsel, right? Whereas Gilbarco, it was pro se, to your point, which I think completely changes. Is like, well, I'm using it for like a legal work product thing in my own mind as a pro se, I think defendant. So like there has to be some kind of work product around my own usage for my own legal kind of edification. So I think it's very easy to read those cases differently just based on that. But there's like many other reasons, including the fact that Judge Rakoff was the judge in Hepner. So I don't know. I'm happy to dive deeper into those things, but I think that it gets to the point of like you can only control what you can control.
Yeah.
And if the one thing you control is making sure that you have enterprise tools and confidentiality provisions, and you're like clearly using it within a closed universe, like only among you and your counsel, well, then that's like very different than what happened in Hepner, right?
Right. Exactly.
And privilege is a funny thing because I mean, if you and I had an attorney-client relationship right now on this video call, and there's somebody standing outside your door who can hear the conversation, I mean, that's a problem, so you have to be mindful of stuff like that.
So I would say like, people come to me and ask these questions all the time. But, of course we can geek it out on how to interpret these cases and making speculations of like, how the dicta, means this and, that's the nuance of that. I think it's just very simple rules. One is if you're asking for legal advice from an AI tool, ideally you have an enterprise license in place. Or there's these like team licenses, right? The team license, and then some of them called business license. That they're for smaller teams, right? You're not committed for a year, and then you can cancel, on a monthly basis. Those have the same legal protection. They almost always use the same legal terms. Or if you're doing an API call, right? They're also under the same legal terms as the enterprise agreements as well. So, and then what I do nowadays, like, if I have something that I would always like, before I ask the question, I would change the title of that conversation, attorney-client privilege. Nice. I don't know whether it helps or not, but I do that.
Well, it's the same way you would do an internal, like inside an organization. There would be like general communication channels, and there's a separate channel for attorney-client privilege conversations. So it's taking that concept and just shifting it into the AI era, I would assume.
Yeah, and actually, when I started doing that, I realized actually I have over labeled attorney-client privilege on even our team channel, Then I went back and it was like, our team channel actually has like just standard group team chat has like attorney-client privilege. And I went in and I took that out because as we all know, right, like if everything is privileged, but nothing is privileged. So we just need to be a little bit more disciplined as to, hey, when you're talking about one case, keep it in one conversation. When you talk about another case, keep it in another conversation, and then just mark the whole thing attorney-client privilege. I mean, it can't be perfect, right? I'm sure that if things get litigated, there will always be arguments back and forth. But I think that those two things, one, enterprise tool, two is like keep the conversation narrow, labeled. I think will help a long way.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. If everything is privileged, nothing is privileged. That's a really succinct kind of capstone for everything that we're talking about, not just today, but as a general part of our practice. As these tools continuously get rolled out, more and more people are using them. More of our clients are using them. More of our counterparties are using them. It's the way of the world. And you're exactly right. There is more litigation to come. Gilbarco and Hepner are certainly not the last. So it'll be really interesting to see. As we are running low on time, greatly appreciate again you joining us from across the pond and late at night over there. Do you have any final thoughts or things you want to share with the audience before we say goodnight?
Yeah, I would just say that AI is moving so fast at a dizzying pace. Even I couldn't keep up, right? I'm like literally doing this almost on a full-time basis now. But that's okay. You don't have to keep up with like everything and anything that's ongoing at the same time. What you could potentially do is to take these shortcuts, right? You don't have to spend 3 years perfecting, prompting. Now you can just like go to agentic. Don't despair, right? Even if you can't set up your cloud, on day one, that's okay, right? Come back in 2 weeks and then, try to get somebody else to guide you to do that for afternoon. Just always come back. Keep in mind, as easy and as hard as flossing teeth, and flossing teeth every month, like just once a month, is better than nothing, right?
It's true. We don't give legal advice here, but we do give dental advice. You should floss your teeth.
That's right.
More than once a month. Wei Chen, Chief Legal Officer of Infoblox, we really appreciate you coming by. It's been a fascinating discussion, and we'd love to have you back on, when the next big lawsuit comes out or some AI regulation comes out. We would love to hear your thoughts. We thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.